Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We got the semi-finals here, continuing our streak of watching the Demon Ranger himself, George Jones, battle himself through the top eight, hoping to take down Steve here. Steve, another local player, started playing around heavy hitters with his brother Dave, who some might know generally. Dave the Pyro is his name on Talshar and around on like YouTube and Twitch. I know he's generally quite active on the kind of social media side of things. But Steve, very much so a Guardian stan, as you can see here, playing Victor Goldmain, one of his very favorites, hoping to win big. I think this is Steve's first ProQuest top eight, at least in matches that I can remember. So congrats to Steve on that. As far as matchups go, I would say that this is probably one of Marlynn's harder matchups. Victor having access to both the potential to play directs such as Staunch Response, Sink Below, Fate Foreseen, Shelter, etc., all very good into the large attacks that Marlynn has. Not quite like Azalea, where you can kind of only have to worry if there's an Arsenal D-React overpower only working on action cards, making it quite hard for Marlynn to only block or to only make Victor block with one card, especially because Victor also plays quite a lot of blocking cards. Test of Strength, Test of Iron Grip, all very strong cards. Test of Iron Grip in particular, very good, since it allows the Victor to potentially take the Marlynn off of an arsenal if the Marlynn is only keeping one card. But the Marlynn also, in their own sense, does like to keep multiple cards in their hands when they're firing a big harpoon. Usually when they're doing things such as playing their three of a kinds. What I'm expecting in this matchup is for George to try and send as many huge, large arrows as possible while trying to subvert the disruption that Victor also brings. Victor having access to quite potent on hits himself, such as Chokeslam, very good into the Marlynn, who does like to buff their arrows quite a lot, and also things such as Boulder Drop. Anything that lets you kind of take cards from Marlynn, I think is good in general. And potentially playing things like Renounced Grandeur, which I believe should stop you making gold tokens. But not quite sure if they are playing that in the list. And of course, stuff like Spinal Crush. Spinal Crush being very good into Marlynn as they like to spin their wheels, playing multiple non-attack actions, multiple things with Go Again. So I believe George hoping to probably try and play a bit of a slower game here compared to the last one into the Acilio. Probably trying to set up, play some smaller hands, probably shooting smaller harpoons if possible. And also probably trying to build up a gold base, as I believe the way that Marlynn could realistically lose this is if they run out of gold in their reserves. So seeing those two sleeves there on the top headpiece would suggest another Crown of Dominion game, which makes me believe that they just play Crown of Dominion into every matchup, to be honest. Yeah, we'll see how this goes between them as they start off about now. So I believe Steve decided to go first here, being the higher seeded player, presenting the usual fridge that Victor has available to them. Notably, Quick Dodge Clusters actually has a pretty interesting secret mode into this matchup, or into any matchup where you have access to it, where you can pitch into it multiple times on the same attack, which lets you subvert the Go Fish abilities of a Marlynn by getting rid of the cards in your hand that you would otherwise discard them. Steve just making a seismic and passing, arseling a card, giving George the avenue to have another very strong start in this game. Once again, another free of a kind, but this one backed up by both Golden Tip and the name I've forgotten. How have I forgotten the name of this card? Catch of the Day. That's what it's called, I believe. Arseling a Redfin Harpoon with the Marlynn trigger. Finding another free of a kind going to in the pitch there, which is not ideal, but it seems like a necessary rather a necessity for George here, as they wouldn't have had the pitch to fire this off otherwise. So not the best start in regards to the first four cards that they had. I think you would have liked to have been able to arsenal the three of a kind again, to have a come back to having to block Steve on their return fire, but Steve just blocking with blue here, suggesting that they only have they have no reds in their hand, which is ideal for Steve here. I think best case scenario for him really. It never feels nice when your harpoons miss on their go fish as you need to try and generate as much gold as possible. However, this is just a very large harpoon coming in for 13, I believe. George trying to find the 13 on the dice, which doesn't exist as the dice only got to 12, as he made very aware to me during the day how annoying that was for him. Steve blocking for 7 here. I believe just blocking with his armor to try and subvert damage. I'm not sure how good that is for Steve. I think usually it's probably better for him to take the damage in the earlier harpoons if he's not able to stop the on-hit. This not having an on-hit means I would probably be more likely to just take a block free and take the 10, as I think the armor is more important to block a go fish trigger that is more prevalent. Steve flipping over a boulder drop red there with the Iron Song gloves, showing a riches as well, which is very good for Steve here, getting to generate a gold, especially because they're not playing Crown of Dominion as a matchup, trying to opt for more blocking power in their helmets. Balance adjusters being particularly good into Marlynn, as they love to draw cards. It looks like Steve will probably start the turn by activating their pot of riches in some capacity, probably by making a seismic. There we go. Boulder Drop being particularly good here, as George is off Arsenal and only has the 4 cards available to them. So being able to stop George from having the 4 cards going to the next turn, guaranteed, while also making sure that the first card that they do draw is basically irrelevant, since it's the same as just having that card in hand. So they aren't able to fish for another arrow if they didn't have one already. However, he is a bit flooded on cards in his hand, and it seems like he has a bit of an issue being able to use them all. So it's possible that he instead just sends in the card in his hand, which is what you'd be doing by sending out the Cranial Crush. Cranial Crush, not a bad blue attack to send out, especially as the Crush trigger is quite prevalent into Marlynn, being able to stop them from drawing cards should they take the Crush trigger. It looks like George just happy to block for free, which would suggest that they are perfectly happy to not want to draw cards, which to me smells like a Codex of Frailty, especially with only 3 cards in their hand. Activating Hammerhead here to then play the Codex of Frailty. There we go. That makes a lot of sense. And then, luckily for them, having the King Shark Harpoon in their hand to block with, to sail that right into their arsenal. Running hot here, George Jones, so far. Let's see if he can convert that into a win here in one of his harder matchups. In for a big hefty 10. Steve deliberating what to block with. Looking in his hand, looks like he's got a Test of Iron Grip there, which are usually quite powerful. In this case, still letting you block 4 over with a card in hand, blocking for 7. It means that he'll probably need to throw some more armor in here if he wishes to block this fully. Although he does have the capacity to potentially lose the cards in his hand if he does lose the clash, which is possible. Marlynn does have fairly large arrows, a lot of them being 6. And also Victor having the fail case of having some non-attacks in his deck. The one of which we have luckily seen get put to the bottom with the riches. That one is not one that you usually want to see on top of your deck with a clash, nor cards like Visit the Goldmane Estate or any of the other block cards that you have. But Steve opting to block for 9 here, blocking for 10 altogether. Another issue here is, as mentioned, Visit the Goldmane Estate on top of the deck. Not the best for Steve, especially because he's only got 2 gold here. So if he wants to respin, he has to both put the very powerful Visitor Masonry on the bottom and lose a gold. But he's deciding instead to discard this Peck Perfect, which makes sense. Peck Perfect, not the best card, probably not something you want to put in your arsenal. Quite expensive. You're probably opting to put more of the disruptive element, like attacks, in your arsenal instead. Then Steve coming in here for 7 because of the frailty, even though he had the +1 counter from the Iron Song. Yeah, I have to apologize if I do get the names wrong. I usually just look at them and go, "Oh yeah, the arms that block and flip and counter and stuff." I believe it's Iron Soul or it's Iron Hide. It sounds like it's something of that ilk. They're not really relevant at the moment. So George blocking 4 here to prevent the crush trigger. Lucky for him having the frailty as well to stop this from being more than just a block of 4. Flipping over a yellow golden tip there with the to make a gold, I believe. And just taking 3 here, subverting the crush trigger, getting to come into this turn with like 4 cards total, one being the card they pondered into their arsenal last turn off the Codex of Frailty. Steve looking to ideally play this, visit the Gold Main Estate, and set up the powerful might going into the next turn while also having a follow-up attack potentially. George maybe trying to fish for a King Kraken Harpoon to be able to prevent Steve from doing that, but alternatively, another harpoon such as another King Shark Harpoon would be a great choice for him as normal in the Marlynn deck. Looks like George deliberating what to do here. As we can see, I think while the life totals may be in favor of Steve, he has had to sacrifice all of his armor very early to do that. While one not even being super important, since Steve ended up still having to discard the perfect, losing the clash on there. But George here only coming in with a cheating scoundrel with the sunken shark harpoon, the CNC harpoon, basically. With Steve not having an arsenal, so not the best follow up from George. Not disrupting Steve in any way. Only coming in for 13 here, I believe. But I believe they are wagering the gold. Steve blocking with a Clash of Bravado, reeling a Spinal Crush, which is very nice. Winning a Clash, but not really meaning anything, as the gold is not an aura, it is a item. Taking 8 there, it looks like, and receiving a gold for his troubles. 2 gold, in fact, as George tapped their gold baited hook. Steve now coming in with a cranial crush again. Oh, sorry, I saw why. George stole Steve's gold actually with the gold baited hook, which I forgot is something you can do. That's actually quite an important angle in this matchup, as George is able to just continually steal Victor's gold and stop him from hoarding all of Daddy's money, to be able to do things like set up strong visit to Gold Main Estate turns, which means that realistically, Gold Main Estate very much a detriment in this matchup, and possibly means that Steve maybe should have, instead of discarding the Peck Perfect, just trying to cash in as much gold as possible for the clashes, as it seems like otherwise he's just going to lose it to these powerful overpowered attacks from George. Another boulder drop coming in for 7 here. Steve unfortunately having to pitch 2 reds here, I believe, as he missed on the gold draw for another blue. Not the best hand for Steve. I think Steve would have much preferred to attack with this cranial crush here over this boulder drop. 9 being a much harder number to block properly with a crush trigger, but even so, getting 2 cards off of the George on the Marlin here, although one of them being a sunken treasure, which gives George another gold. So George sitting on an absolute stack of gold here, Scrooge McDucking his way into Steve. Steve sitting there with his little shield, the only gold he has available currently. George breaking one of his many, many, many golds. Breaking another one just to draw some cards, find an arrow ideally. He does have, worst case, the Goldfin Harpoon, which I believe is his the card he's going to trigger with Marlynn. So I think that's probably his fail-safe worst case if he doesn't draw a relevant Harpoon. A worst case, if he has to keep it in his hand, he can always discard it to the wager or arsenal it if he does find a better Harpoon to come in with. This time he is coming in for, I believe it's 15, with 6 from the Harpoon. Oh, 13, sorry, excuse me. 13 overpower. Oh, very nice from Steve. He's blocked with a Clash of Bravado. The Clash not necessarily being relevant in terms of destroying an aura, but is revealing a Funk, which gives Steve a Might as he won the Clash, and he gets to block 8 here with the Shelter from the Storms. So still hitting. George gets to make a gold off the wager and do a hefty chunk of damage to Steve, going down to 22. So this is what we're likely to see here, where the Marlyn slowly able to continue the advantage of the fact that the Victor doesn't have the health pool or the armor pool available to completely stop out these arrows. That not being a particularly relevant arrow, since it was just pure damage, really. But quite importantly, stuff like this, so like the Golden Sun, for example, coming in from Steve here, the Seismic Surge allowing Steve to just pitch one blue off of it, coming in for 8. Not being able to break any gold to have this come in for 11, but at least the Might laying it coming for a respectable 2-card 8 here. Unfortunately for Steve, this is just damage, like I said, which I think is not ideally what you want to be doing into the Marlyn. You want to be presenting on hits. Like George is doing. George having the perfect follow-up of being able to block with 3 cards and come in with another Codex. This Codex also with an authority of a tire pitch, meaning that if Steve would like to do anything such as a staunch response, this, if he's drawn it or play any of his sink belows or shelters, he's only seen 1 shelter, so it's possible that he sees a couple of his D-Rex soon, if not now, which would make it very awkward for him. Means that George is coming in here probably with, that's interesting, he's coming in with the CNC Harpoon here, rather than just deciding to use something like the King Shark Harpoon. I believe the case is because it's going to shove a card in Steve's arsenal because of the Codex, meaning that he's forced to lose a card here and make a gold, which is very strong. It means that I think that the reason that George has decided to do this is because it guarantees that he gets a Go Fish trigger here and forces a card out of Steve's hand and also gets a gold for his trouble. So he's guaranteed the gold off of this, which is very nice, assuming Steve is unable to block it fully. But that, I think, is also fine because the authority means that any big D-Rex that Steve plays would probably take most of his hand, if not all, meaning that George would have another turn to come at him. So a very good play by George here, taking Steve down to 16. So now we're getting to dangerous territory where George is able to maybe 1 or 2 more Harpoons with a couple of buffs on them will seal the deal. So maybe surprising for a lot of people, but George very comfortably in the lead here. Steve has not really been able to get anything going, especially in this regard, as he's had to pitch 2 blues to attack with his Miller's Grindstone for free because of the frailty. So really, this is worst case scenario for Steve. This is not going well for him. It feels like kind of everything coming up George and nothing coming up Steve and Victor here. Very unfortunate scenario for him. At least currently, hoping to see if he's able to take it back going forward, as there are still many D-Rex available to Steve in the deck, and now that we've seen the authority retire pitched by George, it means that Steve will know that he's in the clear to not worry about that. If I was Steve here, I would be hoping to maybe find an arsenal target, a D-React to park, or potentially a big attack if they're not able to play one, and probably just try and stave off George's aggression going forward as much as possible, hoping that he spins a lot of his wheels into a lot of nothing. We've seen 2 Three of a Kinds already, one being pitched earlier on in the game, so we know that it's unlikely to see them very soon. Um, so here we see a bluefin harpoon looking for blues. Go fish. Not too bad here for Steve. This is only coming in for 8 overpower. Unfortunately, again, he doesn't really have a lot of armor to block this. But he's managed to find 2 of the shelters for Storm to block this out fully, which is perfect for him if he's able to find an attack. And he does. It's a choke slam coming in for 6. So just the blue one, which is not ideal. You'd probably prefer to have the red one if he has access to it. But this is still a relevant on hit on a blue, which is ideal for Steve in regards to like the available blues to him, especially because choke slam is probably one of the best ones into them all in stopping them from gaining power on their attacks on the crush. So a good turn cycle there for Steve. And even better now, George only being able to present 5 with no arsenal. So this is, if possible, the way that that Steve can take back the initiative and seize the tempo, as a lot of people like to say. Free card 5, not the best. And this is a great start from Steve here. Clash of strength, drawing him a card, getting him a gold. Blocking with this, the grandeur that I think I mentioned earlier, being potentially quite useful, making a stopping gold generation. However, Steve has decided to block with this, which would suggest a probably more potent attack coming in here instead. I believe I can see a boulder drop for Steve. Steve making a seismic surge and coming in with this boulder drop. I think if I was Steve here, I would maybe have used the 2 available floating to maybe draw a card, see if he can find a card to arsenal, as it's more than likely that George is able to steal the gold that Steve has, and it's not like he needs to pool a large amount of gold in this matchup, as I don't believe he is looking to play any cast homes or for the foreseeable future, especially because it is more than likely that George steals the gold that Steve has very worked so hard for. This is only the second goal that Steve has made this game, which is one being from the riches earlier in the game, which was stole by George with the gold baited hook. Seeing what Steve has drawn, I believe he would have drawn. It would have just been a one of the 8 power blues. So it wouldn't have been the most amazing arsenal, but it's possible that he might have arsenal one of the other blues that he'd had instead, which, even though it's a blue, is still like a potentially relevant on hit, and when both players are in their teens of life, is still a relevant effect. George here playing out his Gulfin Harpoon, or rather not his Gulfin, his King Shark Harpoon. I believe the third one he's cast this game. Winning a clash of the test of Iron Grip, but George not having no cards in hand, but still able to get through with this King Shark Harpoon, taking 2 damage and going fish. Or he's taking 3 damage, sorry, because the right behind you only blocks for 3. Unfortunate for Steve here, having to get rid of the blue in his hand. He gets to keep the Spinal Crush. He's probably going to park that in his arsenal, as he has nothing else to do this turn. But an unfortunate scenario here for Steve, where he is unable to attack with his cards. It's possible if I was Steve, I maybe would not have blocked with the right behind you, and you instead decide to just block with a test of Iron Grip to potentially come in with the Spinal. But of course, then George has the avenue to just take the Spinal Crush, which is one of the damned if you do, damned if you don't issues with Go Fish when you're trying to block it, as they can either take your resource card if you block too much, or they can take the attack that you want to send if you keep the resources available to play with it. So a very annoying kind of gameplay loop there available. George now spinning his wheels once again, drawing cards, playing another King Shark Harpoon. Okay, so I think this is the third one that we've seen. As the first one was through Red Codex, playing the Cheating Scoundrel and the King Shark, coming in for a lofty 14. Huge number here by George. I think we're hoping that Steve is able to find a staunch. Oh, I found 2 staunches, which is not actually ideal for Steve here. It does prevent the full damage of George's attack. However, it does mean that he now does not have access to another staunch. He's only got 1 left in his deck, and it means that he doesn't come back with anything here, leaving George to come into him with his full 4 cards and 5 gold, which is a very large amount. George here getting rid of a gold to get a Culvin Harpoon. Pitch the Riches to play the Big Game Trophy Shot. I believe I was calling it Big Game Hunter last game, but I think that's wrong. It's Big Game Trophy Shot. Make a goal, drawing a card, discarding, most likely discarding this Golfin Harpoon if he has found another Harpoon to play. If not, more than likely just discarding one of the extra cards in his hand. It looks like he's deliberating on discarding this Hamstring Shot blue to then load this Golfin, which means that he's likely missed on the Harpoon, or he is just trying to send as much damage as possible while using his little cards. As you see here in his arsenal, in his pit zone, he has a Bluefin Harpoon there, which he's decided not to play. He decided to instead play this Golfin Harpoon. I believe the reason for that is because he had a big game trophy shot and a Bluefin Harpoon, and so he wouldn't have been able to cast the Bluefin Harpoon if he had kept it and attacked with it, which makes sense. See what Steve wants to do. I guess actually he would have been able to be. No, he would be one short because he doesn't have the tunic. His tunic is on 2, so not the strongest back like follow up turn from George here. No on hits, only a Golfin Harpoon. It is coming in for 10, but like considering that you just used one of your big game trophy shots, it's not the best kind of follow up. And if Steve is able to block this in any capacity, I think he's blocking for 9. 10. Blocking for 10. I see. George allowing him to block for 1 more because it's 10. So he's blocking that fully, keeping his gold, preventing George from making any more gold, but he doesn't lose his gold baited hook because he made a gold off of the Fabled. And now Steve coming in for 4 with his Miller's Grindstone. George, not bothered by the Millers, coming in, taking the 4, losing the clash, milling a mystery card, which I can't see, but it looks like it was just a blue arrow. And then Steve drawing up. George knows that he has a Righteous Cleansing in his hand, which is not the best card for Steve here. With George drawing a card off of his gold, pitching a King Kraken Harpoon and a blue, and finding his third free of a kind, which makes sense. Like Marlynn, able to churn through your deck so much, you're more than likely to find these power cards if possible. Steve immediately popping his Balance of Justice. I don't know if I would have immediately done that. I would see what George has because it's still possible that he misses here on a relevant Harpoon, and especially since George has not played any buffs going into this turn, I don't believe. He is only coming in here for 10, and it's King Kraken Harpoon as well, which means that it's more than likely not able to find a card to take. Activating his Quiver of Abyssal Depths. George pitching the Ivor video here would suggest that he's gotten to his pitch deck, unless I missed him shuffling his deck, but I don't believe he did, which means that he is likely to find the third free of a kind that he pitched earlier on in the game, probably in the next hand or 2, although he has just activated his Quiver of Abyssal Depths, so he's going to shuffle that up. So he could draw anything really. He's putting in a couple harpoons in King Shark, the new King or Shark, whatever it is, the CNC one. His name I will never be able to say. And a Bluefin Harpoon, just another blue. It's also relevant on it. Yeah, George's deck looking very light, actually, all things considered. I think it is there was potentially an avenue for Steve to be able to maybe run him out of threats should he have been able to present any kind of relevant on-hit attack outside of just the boulder drops that he was presenting, which were a bit too small, I think, damage-wise, to really pressure George in this game so far. Players having a lot of fun there. I'm actually not sure what they were laughing about. I can't quite remember, even though I was there. Setting aside the equipment, which is fine, all of it being very large and hard to look through for George while he is sorting through Steve's available cards. Steve very much in this game, if he has a very good follow-up going into this next turn with the King Kraken Harpoon not hitting anything, if he's also able to block out the harpoon enough that he isn't in lethal range for any of the smaller harpoons, such as Marlynn's ability, then he would be able to potentially get himself back into a commanding position. Especially because George has not opted to activate his gold baited hook, so he gets to keep the gold. However, he would probably have to block with a non-attack action here if he needed to. But he's able to find he's able to find a a clash of strength here. Oh, rather a test of strength. That's the name of the card. Clash test, blocking 7. Deciding not to put this to the bottom, so not getting the gold, but able to block out here fully, which is perfect. Wondering why Steve did not decide to respin this, unless he doesn't need an extra card to draw and would instead like to keep the Iron Grip to block later on in next turn. But Steve got a cast Holmes here. So interesting. He's decided to play this cast Holmes instead of blocking with it, drawing a card. But we know that he's going to draw a Test of Iron Grip, which is not something that he's able to do anything with going into this next turn, as he only has one resource. He'd have to pitch into it to break a gold if he wants to come into George. But he just wants to keep it for the defensive value, I would imagine, to try and subvert George's next onslaught of Krakeny goodness. When I say Krakeny goodness, this could be any of the harpoons, really. But, an interesting play there from Steve. I think I probably would have bottomed that Iron Grip to try and find a blue or a red to attack with. To then draw, just taking the damage, keeping and then being able to park that defense react in arsenal for later use in a potentially lethal swing from George. Especially because I would have blocked with the cast Holmes as well, to mean that the Kraken Harpoon wouldn't have gotten anything. But we'll see how Steve's decision fares for him. As the authority retire pitched again, not an ideal time for Steve this, as we're getting to a point where he's hoping to find his third staunch, and if there's anything that can make that awkward for Steve, it is an authority retire. Luckily, it doesn't make just a single staunch too bad, because it only costs 2, so you can just pitch off a blue. However, it does mean that if you wanted to pitch into it for the additional ability to block for 4 more, it would require 2 blues and an additional resource, which is not ideal. We'll see what Steve does here, with George activating Hammerhead and deliberating on his arsenal. He's going to gold Finn. Gold baited hook this King Kraken Harpoon. So the third one of the game. Not likely to actually go fish, but is just a large number in this instance. Coming in for 10, I believe. Both George and Steve knowing this Clash of Iron Grip is here. George having multiple cards in hand, so he's going to discard one of them. I believe this was a... he's got 2 cards left in his hand. A good decision by George here to make sure that he still has an arsenal available to him. And in his hand is 2 blues, so Steve having 2 blues here, which is not too bad for him actually. It allows him to crack his gold to draw a card. I'm going to draw this Grandeur of Valheim, I believe. Oh, actually, no, that's the name of the Fable card. Oh, he's instead opting to come in with this Choke Slam, which is actually another good decision by Steve. Actually, a better play than what I would have done, because this is coming in for 9 because of the 3 mites made from the cast homes, and because of the Seismic Surge, he's able to play it just off of the other blue he had in his hand. This is a very good return from Steve, even though it is a blue. It is a blue that is now buffed by the mite tokens, which means that George actually has quite a big decision here in regards to blocking this. It is likely that George just gives him 2 cards, which means he'll only be taking 3. So no crush trigger here, and then if his arsenal is a harpoon, he's able to ideally pitch 2 blues for Hammerhead and send 8 to 10 damage back at Steve, which is still a good, good turn cycle for George. But at the very least, Steve was able to send out a relevant attack. But George blocking with all four of his cards, which suggests to me that the card in his arsenal is not a harpoon of any sort, or maybe a buff instead. George giving Steve reprieve here. Let's see if Steve is able to use it to full effect. If he's able to present another card for George to block. Steve making a seismic. He has put his chess piece in the bin, but it is still there. So I imagine the players will fix that in a minute or two, ideally. Yeah, okay, here we go. We're seeing here players realizing their mistakes. Steve accidentally playing his tectonic plating in the graveyard, but it has battle one, so it doesn't actually disappear. Um, so Steve managing to come in for 8 here. George unable to make any tokens for the rest of the or any auras for the rest of the game. So actually not as relevant as I thought, as I believe it only affects aura tokens, which like I mentioned I think earlier, gold is not an aura. It is a token, but it's not an aura token, so it does not get affected by the grandeur. Now Steve blocking this Murderous Rebel for free, I believe. Georgia. Yeah, I see he has a codex in his arsenal, which is interesting. It's possible that I didn't see the full extent of the hand that he blocked 4 cards with. But I don't. Maybe it's possible he didn't have 2 blues, or he didn't have enough to block 6 and also keep 2 blues on the last hand. So he just conceded a hand to then hopefully come in this. But actually, the crush trigger from this being relevant to stop the tokens from Codex of Frailty. However, it doesn't stop George from being able to take the King Shark Harpoon, or King Kraken Harpoon, rather. Oh no, it is King Shark. Yeah, King Shark Harpoon, which is now coming in for 12 and double Go Fish. This is the an ideal return from George here. 12 being a very hard number for Steve to block, and is more than likely going to mean that Steve is going to lose multiple cards from his hand. He has the potential to draw a staunch response, potentially. It looks like he's only playing the shelters from Storm. We haven't seen any sink belows so far. Um, no trounces either, which is has not been a common option. Oh, you know, put my foot in my mouth here. Here's a sink below. It's actually possible that we saw a sink below earlier, but I might have forgotten about it. But yeah, so playing both sinks and shelters. This is either the first or second sink that Steve has played, which means he has access to one more potentially. But he still has to lose out on any offense here as he loses his card, and he loses the gold as George has stolen it with his gold-plated hook. As I believe Steve only managed to block for 8 on the 12. So he takes 4 down to 4. 4 lethal range, almost certainly for George here. 4 is has a lot more capacity for George to kill Steve, as is a good break point for a lot of his arrows. A lot of his arrows coming in for 12, overpower and the like, sometimes 14. So if he's able to get an arrow up to 14, it could potentially spell the end for Steve, unless he's able to block it out with a staunch response that he draws and a direct potentially. We'll see what Steve does in response to George's onslaught. George trying to finish the game using as much of his resources as possible to present as big of a turn as he can. Although he has pitched a big game trophy shot, but played a big game trophy shot. So he has access to 4 damage on the board so far. Looks like he has in his hand another catch of the day, which is another +2 buff, one that is able to, at the very least, stop Steve from having a relevant turn if George is able to go fish with the adequate trigger. Considering the cards left in George's deck, I believe there is 1 King Shark Harpoon, but it looks like George has not found it. So instead, he is just going to buff this Goldfin Harpoon very large. So far, this is coming in 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. So if he buffs it with Hammerhead, it'll be 15, which should be more than enough to take down. Oh, they're catching the day. Yeah, so 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. This is 15 now. So very large number Steve unable to block it, losing out there to the large Gulfin Harpoon, and George moving on to the finals.